So far, we've looked at creating a static website and pages. That is content which doesn't change and doesn't get any information from the user. We simply send information to the people who are viewing the page, and they read the text and look at the images and videos and things like that, but it doesn't allow them to send us any information. In order to do that, we're going to need to create a form. And a form can be used in a lot of different ways, and we see them all the time and probably don't even think about them. Some of them are obvious, like filling out a job application online. Others are less obvious, like posting on social media an image or short video clip. All those things require forms, whether you're signing in to Amazon or buying something off of Amazon. Whether you're filling out that job application that we mentioned or leaving a customer comment on a company that you visited or used their services. All those things require forms. And so let's look at how we're going to create a form on our web page. Now, to create the form, we're just going to use the form tag. And by default, we now have a form on our page. It doesn't display anything, doesn't show anything, and it's not real helpful, to be honest, but it is a form. There are a few technically optional parameters that are strongly suggested that you use, however, and we're going to just look at a couple of these. The first one we're going to look at is the action property. And this property is designed to let us know where are we going to send the form information. And that's a very important thing we have to know. All form information has to be processed in some manner. And now, there's a lot of different ways to process these forms, and they're going to use some sort of server-side language in most cases. And you could use Ruby, or you use Java, you could use Perl if you're really old-fashioned, or PHP, or Python. There's a lot of different things that you can use. And what it's going to go to, and what type of language you're going to go to, is where you define the action. And all you're going to define is the file that needs to be sent to, or possibly the whole URL address if that's the appropriate manner. So here in the form action, I'm just going to give it form-processor.php. And PHP is a very common language. It's found on about 80+% of all web servers on the internet, so you can find it and use it anywhere. Now, we're not going to get into PHP in this video series, although I do have another video series on using PHP if you're interested. But we're not going to do it here because that's a whole separate language and how you process it and use it, and it's entirely different than HTML. Now, the next step is we need to know how we're going to send this information. And that's going to be through our method. And our method has three typical values: dialog, which is not commonly used, get, and post. We're going to focus on the get and post. So get, and if you do notice, it is all capitalized. Get is used for when you want to post something that's relatively short and you want to do it very quickly. Get is very fast. In fact, you've probably used Get and didn't realize you're using it in many times. You say, well, how do I know that? Well, it's easy. If you go to a search engine like Google or Bing and you type something in, you look up in the URL address, it no longer says google.com or bing.com or yahoo.com or anything like that. It's going to say google.com/ and then it's going to have a question mark and some extra information. When you use get, you put the URL that you're going to, a question mark, and then you give it the name value pairs of what's going to be inside that form. And if you look inside of there, you'll find eventually that information. There's some other stuff that Google throws in there via some hidden fields, but what you typed in, what's called the query, is put in there. And the reason for doing it is it's very simple to do, it's very fast to process, and if I want to take my search results and send them to someone else, I can share them a little bit easier. Now, they may not get the actual same results because of something called personalization, but that's a whole nother topic that's beyond this scope. We're not going to worry about that right now. Get has a lot of advantages. but it does have a couple of disadvantages. The first disadvantage is that obviously because it's in the URL string, anyone can see it. And when we say anyone, there's two different ways that this can be seen easily. And that is, I could have a person standing over my shoulder when I'm working at the coffee shop or in a computer lab or, any place like that. And they can do something called shoulder surfing where they just look over and they see what I typed in. So it's not secure from that standpoint. It's also not secure because it's in the URL request string, that if I have a person in between me and the server who's snooping on the traffic, it's not encrypted because of the URL string, and therefore they can read it and see anything I type in. So anything that needs to be kept secure, and those are going to be things like passwords and social security numbers, bank account numbers and credit card numbers, but also less commonly thought of things, what we might refer to as personally identifiable information. And that might be where I have a couple of pieces of information like an address and a name or a phone number or something like that, where I can start to identify a unique individual off of it. All that stuff should never be put into a GET form processor. The other big limitation is the fact that the URL string right now is limited to approximately 4,000 characters. Now, that limit may be adjusted in the future, but right now we're limited to 4,000. Even if it is adjusted, it's probably not going to be adjusted a lot. And you might think, well, how much would that matter? I mean, I'm typing in stuff. I don't type in 4,000 characters. Well, remember, this includes the domain name, the file name, subfolder names, subdomain names, plus all stuff you send in. So it's not just what you type in, and it's also what you send in. So for example, if I'm on social media and I'm posting an image, then that's clearly going to be more than 4,000 characters. So if I want to send something very large or something that needs to be secure, I'm going to instead use post. And what post does is it sends the form information inside of what's known as the HTTP headers. And that is when I'm uploading a file request and say, hey, could I get to file such and such? That part's sent unsecure, but there's a packet of information that goes along with it that is encrypted. And this is part of that information. And I can put as much as I want, or I can even split them up over multiple small chunks and then have them reassemble back on the server end. And so if I need to upload a file, a video clip or an image, or maybe just have a really long piece of form data, this is the way to do it. If I send something that needs to be secure, then post is how I'm going to do it because that's all encrypted. There is a couple other attributes to the form that you might look at. In the old days, we used something called name, but that's been deprecated. Now we'll use ID. And you might say, well, why would I want to use ID? Well, the same reason we might use it on other tags, to uniquely identify it. And this is especially helpful if I have, for example, 2 or more forms on a page. I might have a login form and a search form so someone can go and look up a FAQ. I might have a customer comment feedback form and then a search form so people can search the site. And so the ID gives me a little bit of extra information, especially if I'm going to be programming on the client side and I need to do different form interactions. Now, client-side programming, once again, is outside the realm of what we're doing here, so we're not going to focus on that right now. We are going to focus on just using the HTML. There is also a target, and much like a target on an anchor tag where we link to a different page, we can also do that here inside of a form, and so we can send it to a different window or sub-window. Not typically used, and so you don't usually have to worry about that. So we're going to kind of just ignore that for right now, but it is helpful to know if you need to use it. Now, the rest of what you do in a form is done in other tags, so we're going to focus on those later. For right now, we just simply set up the form and we're ready to start using it.